Good afternoon, Tim. How are you?
Good afternoon, Marianne. Doing very well.
Welcome to the Black Rock Riverside Alliance Conservation Conversations. You're my third guest in the series. I just want to make sure that we thank the Paul and Helen Ellis Trust, who were doing generous contributions to allow us to do this series. We're really excited about talking to the community about all the great conservation things that are going on in our community. So why don't you, as I've asked everyone, to please introduce yourself and tell us a little about who you are and maybe why you got involved in what you're getting involved in.
Oh, okay. Yes. So my name is Tim DePriest. I'm a biologist, but with a more specific title of the Niagara River Habitat Ecologist in the Division of Fish and Wildlife for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation here in Region 9 out of the Buffalo office. I'm from Tonawanda originally, and had the pleasure of growing up in the town and making frequent trips to the river. So I feel like it's pretty fortunate that I get to come back and work on conservation issues in my hometown. I just started this job 10 years ago, coming from the Syracuse region, where I was working as a biologist there for New York DEC. So I've been here 10 years now.
Wow.
Doing this work that was prompted by the relicensing of the Niagara Power Project, and a position that was created to deal with some specific projects that I'll talk about eventually here. So
Yeah,
that's
really,
my short story.
It's really interesting to see some of those things come to fruition. It's really pretty amazing stuff. So let's start with the questions. The first one is, why is the Niagara River an important ecological resource?
Yeah, good question.
Sending it.
Well, for people that live along the river, there's no doubt that they can see the abundance of life that's going on there. Both in the water and near the water. That is pretty obvious, I think, to most people, the abundance of life. But what took me coming back here to realize is that Niagara River is actually special ecologically at a global scale. And we've got, at all different seasons, migratory wildlife in the form of gulls and waterfowl that are using the river during their various life stages, whether it's for feeding or breeding, or just simply migrating through. So that puts it in the context of having global significance, in being, any given day you can see wildlife that spend most of their lives up in the Arctic Circle, in the waterfowl, or sometimes you're looking at birds that have just migrated from South America to breed here. So it's pretty exciting in that regard, ecologically, but also just at the local level, the sheer diversity of life in the river that's the result of the high productivity. It's a shallow water habitat where there's abundant vegetation growth, and that leads to just an abundance of life, that diversity that stems from that. So it's really a ecological gem that it took me, as a trained biologist, coming back here, not really knowing about it before that, to really put my eyes on it and appreciate it for that. And the DEC recognizes that as well, and that's why we have such a presence here.
I have also been here all my life, so it's kind of interesting that we don't recognize what we have until we travel elsewhere and come back. And
yeah,
I can remember seeing the Colorado River for the first time and saying, "What river?" Like, so used to having the Niagara River as my reference point, that it was like, no, that's not real. So it's very interesting. Yeah. Let's go to the next question. Tell me a little bit more about the DEC, because I think for most of the people in the community, the DEC is, quite frankly, a mystery. I mean, we don't see the DEC. I mean, people don't wear uniforms typically. We don't see them on the street. So how do we recognize the DEC, and how do we recognize what it does in our community?
Yeah, Good question. And, you know, we are often kind of just working behind the scenes, and maybe, you know, we are less visible unless you're, you know, a conservation officer. They're the only ones that really wear a uniform, and, you know, they're patrolling the waterfront. So we're a regulatory agency, which means that um, we have to implement the regulations that stem from the conservation law. Okay, that protects all of our natural resources, everything from water to air, as you know, just our general quality programs, we call those. Enforcing the laws through our law enforcement arm, the uniformed officers. Then in my division, we're in the natural resources, and specifically the Division of Fish and Wildlife, manage fish and wildlife populations, and regulate their use in conservation. So obviously fishing is a huge activity on the waterfront.
Sure.
So when folks go out and buy their fishing license and drop a line in the river, they're contributing to the conservation of the aquatic resource, because we regulate the fish that can be caught, and the numbers and things like that. So those are just a few of the kind of examples of how the DEC, I guess, it would be present in the Black Rock Riverside neighborhood. Think about the brownfield program as well. I'll just throw that in there. A lot of the industrial sites are being cleaned up under the watch of our engineers. But I'm going to, you know, I'm just mention specifically what I'm involved with as an ecologist, and that's the implementation of large-scale habitat and ecosystem restoration projects that are mostly advanced through the New York Power Authority's relicensing process. That goes back about 15 years ago. They had to get a license to operate the Niagara Power Project for the next 50 years because their original 50-year license was running out. And the federal government, any operator of a large power project like the Niagara Power Project to address their environmental impact. And so specifically that impact on the Niagara River is tied to the water levels, and how the water levels are manipulated through the act of power by drawing water off the river. And that impacts various habitats, but mostly it's the near shore habitats, the coastal wetlands and the submerged aquatic vegetation that I just mentioned earlier is the reason why it's such an ecological resource. Those aspects of the river are impacted by the power plant, and so to address that, they've engaged in these large-scale restoration projects through the guidance of our agency, the DEC, and our involvement with steering the direction of what these projects want to accomplish.
Jim, can we see any of those from, if we were standing at the riverside at any point, can we see what's going on in the river that you're involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, right there at Black Rock is a great vantage point to see probably 4 different projects that have taken place or are currently active in the river. That section of the river, outside impacts of the project, were impacted previous to that through various different land uses, or I should say water uses in the river. It was predominantly an active sand and gravel mine out there between Strawberry Island, which you can see, you know, standing on the shore of Black Rock, looking down to Motor Island, which is sometimes hard to pick out because it blends in with Grand Island in the background. But that whole area was an active sand and gravel mine. So the river bottom was heavily impacted through that. So we targeted that location to improve the amount of submerged aquatic vegetation and quiet water habitat that were once present there before it was mined. And it was one of the most active parts of the river biologically. And so when you're looking from the shoreline, you'll notice that there have been a number of small islands that popped up in recent years. And those are designed to influence the flow and the wave energy to promote submerged aquatic vegetation and other aquatic habitat that fish and wildlife are known to utilize on the river. So yeah, so you can see the work being done at Strawberry Island. Motor Island had some shoreline stabilization and some offshore structures built around it. But most excitingly, there's a brand new island called Frog Island that was built there, and it takes up about 2 acres of river bottom.
Mm.
But right this year, in fact, I think starting any day now, you'll start seeing some equipment out there building yet another island specifically for terns. And they are a state listed threatened species of colonial water bird that nest on various islands and sandbars and gravel bars historically. And so currently they're, yep.
I just wanted to stop you for a second, because if you ever haven't seen anyone out there with a crane in the middle of the river, it is just the craziest thing you ever want to see.
Yeah, I know.
Who does that work? I mean, who goes out there and does that? You know.
Yeah, well, it's a testament to how big these projects are. I mean, these are meant to be long lasting. You know, these are going to be there forever, basically, and that's the intent. That's the goal, is to make sure that we can, you know, rebuild these resources, restore these resources for the long term. And in fact, I mean, some of these really won't come into fruition for you know, years to come, and it'll continually evolve. It's a long game, I like to say. It's not the kind of thing you just do and everything's better the next day. No, these are structures that are intended to have long lasting, you know, impact. And so the restoration is a long-term goal.
So are we?
But yeah, this summer you'll
one
see,
Frog Island, and we're calling one Tern Island.
we don't have an official name for any of these islands yet. These are all kind of, you know, just our own names for them. But you know, there used to be an island called Frog Island out in the river. And it was changed around a couple of times, so we thought it'd be appropriate to bring that back. Tern Island will probably be called Tern Island. It would make sense. That's why we're building it. It's for the tern. So, but that's the next. That's another step where you have to kind of go through the Coast Guard and get these things on the charts. So.
Yeah, it's pretty a lot of people involved. I mean, the Army Corps, the Coast Guard, DEC,
yes.
Fish and Wildlife. I mean, it's not a simple go out there and dump some rocks.
Right. And all of these projects involved a kind of a long consensus phase, you know, of project design, where we brought multiple stakeholders and experts to the table, figure out how to do these things best. And you know, that was a long process before we actually, you know, had any equipment out there doing any work. So, yeah, it's been really exciting, and you know, there's more to come still, because
we're very excited.
You know, there's still funding for future projects, you know, based on the relicensing. So.
And I will also say, if anybody hasn't been along the East River of Grand Island recently, we've been doing a little bit of walking, and I know a lot of people are kayaking off of there right now, and the restoration work that's been done there is just incredible.
Yeah, it's really impressive, and I'm glad you brought that up, because often these projects, what we're trying to do is address the wave climate in the river, which currently is, as we all know, it's a very popular boating area, right? And that's great. But with the boats comes an impact in the form of boat wakes hitting the shoreline. And it's that same shallow water habitat that's so important that gets kind of beat up by the waves. So we build structures offshore along the East River with our partners to reduce that wave energy. And the added benefit of that is that you now have a nice place to paddle your canoe or kayak where you're not going to get swamped by a gigantic wave.
You got it.
It makes it safer and more enjoyable, you know, so it's an added benefit.
It's really beautiful. If anybody hasn't been there, it's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about our residents and how they can help contribute to our conservation efforts. And are there specific projects, or should they support? How do they support you and your?
Oh, well, I mean, all kinds of ways. Just appreciating the river and understanding the value is a great first step. You know, for many decades, I think a lot of people turned their back on the river. You know, just considered it as an industrial, for industrial purposes only, and not really a place to go enjoy and recreate. So the more people that get out there and explore the river and are able to appreciate it, is, I would say, probably the first most important step. But then there's also direct actions that residents can take to help the overall ecology of the river. Think about things like controlling runoff from rooftops and driveways and things like that, creating areas where water can soak into the ground rather than run into a storm sewer, which leads directly to the river. And we all know what kinds of problems that can bring to the water quality. So controlling our own runoff from our properties. Supporting organizations that are actively advocating for protecting the river. And we're fortunate to have a number of local organizations, from Waterkeeper to Audubon, Western New York Land Conservancy, just to name a few, who are really getting out there and taking direct action to improve the river and its habitats. Getting involved in shoreline sweeps, where you go out in the spring and you pick up the litter that accumulates over the winter. That goes a long way. Planting native plants that benefit the migratory birds that come through. You get a little corner of your yard that can support some native plants that in turn support the overall ecology of the river corridor. Those are just some small examples of what an everyday citizen can do in the neighborhood that contributes.
One of the things we had talked about that I think is important for the communities that we serve is the Black Elk Riverside Alliance was talking about doing tours, like actually going down and doing little tours and little discussions of what's down there. Because I think a lot, as you said, there's a lot of people who are either new to the area or have not really focused on the river the way we have, having grown up here. And I think they don't recognize what access they have and also what resources that they present. And it's a pretty incredible place. I agree with you.
Yeah, that's great that you guys are doing that. I really appreciate that. The more people that value the resource, the easier it is to protect, and that's just a very basic concept, but it's so true.
And I happen to live along the river, and I watch people stop their cars, particularly if they're going to Niagara Falls and they're from out of the area or something, and they will stop and they will take, spend a half an hour just taking pictures of something that we take for granted. So, and they love your islands. I just will now call them Tim DePriest Islands.
No, please don't.
No,
they're really. I just played a very small role, and I'm happy to be able to spread the good news about it. But there is certainly many more people involved than myself.
It's really interesting. If people don't know, if they go down to the foot of Sheridan Avenue, and if you just pull into the boat launch there and just listen, the sounds from the birds there is just something that you've never heard before. It's incredible, the number of birds.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, every year I see something new that tells me the river is on its way to recovery. You just mentioned birds. For the first time this year, I saw a brood of common mergansers that must have successfully nested along the river, and no one's ever seen that before, as far as in my circle of people anyways. That was a new sighting. And of course we had the eagle start nesting on Strawberry Island about 8 years ago, the eagles I should say. And it's things like that. It's those little observations that are all pointing towards a direction of recovery and improved health. So you just got to keep moving in that direction.
I have to ask you one more thing, and you may or may not know about this, but tell me about the emerald shiners and the run that happens along the river every spring. I was there one time to watch it, and it's remarkable. It's like something you'd see on a National Geographic video or something.
I agree. When I first saw that, I was pretty amazed. And I hear they're having a good year this year. They fluctuate a lot from year to year. They're considered what we call a boom bust type of population, of fish.
And they're little fish, right? Because for somebody who doesn't know what they are, they're
right. They're probably the most important fish in the river. And they are just a minnow. Okay, actually, yes, they're a shiner, which technically is not a minnow, but
I would recognize it as a minnow.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, most people would. But they're probably the most abundant species by biomass and have the most important role in the food chain. So that's why the common tern, the threatened species, will fly all the way from South America to nest here, because that's where because they know there's food here. And just about every other animal or fish in the river somehow, directly or indirectly, relies on those emerald shiners, because they're such an important base of the whole food chain, the food web there.
And if you walk down along the river, you literally can look down and see them like in mass running upriver, what I would call upriver, right? It's really
that's when they're making their return trip to the lake. That's when you see them in those dense schools.
Yeah.
But they come out of the lake in the early spring when they go unnoticed under the ice and stuff like that in the river. But when they return to the lake, starting around now is when you really see those large schools that just seem to be endless. It's just like an infinite number of fish.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's totally amazing. Well, I don't have a whole lot of anything else, and I promised I would keep it to about 15 minutes or so. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us, or we're happy to listen?
Well, thank you, Marianne. I want to say that. Thanks for giving me the option to be part of your conversation, conservation conversations. I think it's a great idea. I would say stay tuned. Like I said, there's going to be more projects coming, and even the projects that were built out there have some ways to go still and how they evolve. So keep paying attention and get out there and enjoy it. Get in a canoe or a kayak and get out there and get on the river. If you've never done that, it's really an eye-opening experience. So
and if you
I'll
ever do a bird or any type of mammal count, you call me, because I'm there for you. So
okay, well, we'll be happy to do it.
Our citizen scientist crew will come and be happy to help.
Excellent, glad to hear that.
All right, well, thank you very, very much.
Hey, you're very welcome.
All right, have a great night.
Thank you, you too.